I'll never forget that moment. The baby shower, the laughter, the smell of vanilla frosting, and my mother-in-law's lips brushing against my ear as she whispered, "This child will call me Mom." For a second I froze. I thought I misheard her. I even smiled, awkwardly. Because what else do you do when someone drops a line like that in front of 30 guests and a pink cake? But her eyes, they weren't joking. That night, I went home smiling on the outside, but my hands were trembling the entire way. I didn't know it then, but that whisper wasn't just a comment. It was a promise that turned my world upside down. And if you think I'm exaggerating, oh, I wish I was. You know, people say mother-in-laws are just misunderstood. Yeah, mine understood too much. What came after that whisper was fear, control, and a kind of obsession that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. 1 month later, I packed up my life, took my newborn, and left the country without telling a soul. You want to know why a new mother would do something that extreme? Stay with me, because once you hear what happened between that whisper and my escape, you'll understand. Oh, and before we go any further, hit that like and subscribe. You might just need the strength this story gives. You know, before all of this, my life looked normal. Or at least, I thought it was. I met Ethan when I was 28. He was charming, polite, calm. The kind of man who opened doors and never raised his voice. The kind of man who could make you believe that safety still existed in this world. After a few years of dating, we got married, bought a small house in the suburbs, and started dreaming about having a family. His mom, Margaret, seemed kind too. The first time I met her, she hugged me so tightly that I couldn't breathe, said I was the daughter she never had. I remember thinking, wow, this woman really loves family. If only I'd known how right and how wrong that thought was. In the beginning, she was just involved. You know, helping pick colors for the nursery, calling every morning to ask how I was feeling. It felt sweet and caring even. Until one day I realized she wasn't asking. She was instructing what kind of stroller to buy, what kind of diet to follow, even what name she thought suited her grandchild better. I used to laugh it off. I mean, what new mom doesn't deal with a little mother-in-law madness, right? But soon it didn't feel like madness. It felt like surveillance. She would drop by without warning, let herself in with the spare key and check if I was resting enough. Once, she even rearranged the nursery, said the crib felt wrong near the window. Ethan would just smile and say, "She means well, honey. She's just excited. That word still makes my stomach twist, because excitement doesn't sound like her whispering in my ear. Don't worry, I'll take care of my baby. At first, I convinced myself I was overreacting. Hormones, pregnancy nerves, all the cliches people throw at you when your instincts start screaming. But there's a kind of tension you can't unfeel. It sits in your chest, heavy and constant. One evening I caught her standing in the nursery, stroking my baby bump and humming softly, a lullaby I'd never heard. I asked her, "What are you doing?" She smiled and said, Practicing. I didn't say a word, just walked away, but something in me changed that night. A quiet alarm started ringing, and I couldn't turn it off. I wish I could say I trusted Ethan enough to tell him how scared I was, but every time I tried, he'd just shake his head and laugh it off. "You two will get along once the baby's here," he'd say. Maybe he believed it, or maybe he just didn't want to see the truth. Either way, the storm was already forming, and I was the only one who felt the thunder coming. The morning of the baby shower felt like something out of a magazine. Pastel balloons, a 3-tier cake, and pink ribbons everywhere. My friends had planned it, but somehow Margaret, my mother-in-law, had taken complete control. She'd called the bakery herself, picked the decorations, and even decided on the guest list. I tried not to care. It was just one day to celebrate this tiny life growing inside me. But when I walked into that hall, something felt wrong. Too many people I didn't recognize, too many smiles that felt rehearsed, and in the middle of it all, Margaret stood like a queen, giving orders, greeting guests like she owned the moment. When she saw me, she rushed over, all smiles, all sweetness. "Oh, there's my girl," she said, kissing my cheek, but her grip on my hand was just a little too tight. "Everything looks beautiful," I told her. She smiled again, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Oh, I know," she said softly. "I wanted it to be perfect. After all, it's a big day for my baby." My baby. I laughed awkwardly, thinking maybe she just misspoke. Maybe she meant her grandbaby. But then, as the day went on, that phrase kept slipping out. My baby this, my baby that. Guests smiled politely, but I saw the confusion in their eyes. Halfway through the event, while everyone was taking photos, I felt her hand on my shoulder. She leaned close, her perfume heavy and sweet, and whispered, so softly that only I could hear, "This child will call me Mom." The world just stopped. For a few seconds I didn't even breathe. My heart pounded so hard I thought someone might notice. I pulled back and looked at her, waiting for a smile, a laugh, anything to make it a joke. But she wasn't joking. Her eyes were steady, cold, possessive. She turned away before I could respond and started handing out cupcakes like nothing had happened. The rest of the day is a blur. Laughter, gifts, fake smiles. I remember my friends asking if I was okay. I said I was just tired, but inside something broke. Later that night, when I told Ethan what she'd said, he laughed. "Babe, you're overreacting." She didn't mean it literally. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the way she looked at me, it wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was a claim. That night, as I washed off my makeup and stared into the bathroom mirror, I replayed her words again and again. "This child will call me Mom." Who says that? What kind of person looks at another woman's unborn baby and says that? I felt fear, yes, but also something else. A strange quiet rage that settled deep in my stomach. Because for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about control or attention. It was about ownership. Margaret didn't see me as family. She saw me as an obstacle. And my baby, the one she called hers, was the prize. I barely slept that night. The next morning I woke up with one thought pounding in my head. Something is very, very wrong. But what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning, because a whisper can haunt you. But what she did after the baby was born, that's when the nightmare truly began. After the baby shower, nothing felt the same. It was like that whisper had cracked something open. Something I couldn't close again. Margaret started showing up more often. Sometimes with food, sometimes just to check in, and sometimes for no reason at all. She'd bring baby clothes, toys, bottles, things I never asked for, things I didn't even like. She'd say, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I know what's best for the baby." The baby, not my baby. And every time I tried to push back, she'd tilt her head, smile sweetly, and make me feel guilty. "I'm just trying to help, dear. You should be resting." But her eyes told a different story. There was something territorial in them. Something that made me feel small in my own home. Ethan didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. He was working longer hours, coming home tired, and whenever I mentioned his mom, he'd sigh. "Can we not do this again? She's just excited, okay? She's not the enemy, not the enemy." That's what he said. But what do you call someone who slowly erases your place in your own life? A few weeks later, she started crossing bigger lines. She had a duplicate key made. I still don't know how. I'd wake up from a nap and find her in the kitchen, humming, cooking, acting like she lived there. Once I came downstairs and found her folding my laundry, including my underwear. When I told her it was inappropriate, she just smiled and said, "You'll thank me once the baby comes. You'll see how much you'll need me." That sentence, "You'll need me." It started haunting me. Then the gifts became rules. She brought a crib without asking and demanded we replace ours because hers was safer. She told Ethan she'd chosen the perfect pediatrician, and he agreed before even asking me. Every decision, every boundary, slipping away, piece by piece. And then came the worst moment yet. One afternoon I heard her talking in the nursery. I thought she was on the phone, but when I peeked through the door, she was holding my belly, whispering. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough to make my blood run cold. She said, "You'll be mine soon. Don't worry, Mommy's here." Mommy. That word hit me like ice water. I walked in quietly and said, "Margaret, please stop. This isn't normal." She turned around slowly, still smiling. "You're just hormonal," she said. "You'll understand later." I remember backing away, my hands shaking. Every instinct in me was screaming that something was deeply, dangerously wrong. That night, I tried talking to Ethan again. This time I begged him to listen. He looked tired, frustrated. "You're making it sound like my mom's a villain," he said. "She's just being caring." I wanted to scream. Caring doesn't look like obsession. Caring doesn't whisper ownership into someone else's child. But I didn't fight him. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the wall, realizing that I was on my own. From that night on, I started locking the doors, even during the day. I changed where I kept my spare keys, double-checked every window, and slept with my phone under my pillow. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting my baby from a woman who believed she was the rightful mother. And though the world outside was calm, I could feel the storm pressing closer, inch by inch. It wasn't a question of if it would break. It was when. The breaking point didn't come all at once. It crept up slowly, like a storm you keep convincing yourself will pass. After the baby was born, Margaret practically moved in. She said it was temporary, just to help while I recovered. Ethan thought it was a good idea. "She knows what she's doing," he said. But it didn't take long for me to realize. She wasn't there to help. She was there to take over. At first, it was the little things. She'd insist on holding the baby longer than I did. When the baby cried, she'd rush in before I could move, whispering, "Shh, Mommy's here." I'd correct her. "I'm his mother." She'd just smile, that same cold, knowing smile, and say, "Of course you are, dear." But the baby always quieted for her. And every time that happened, I felt a piece of myself crumble. I started to feel like a guest in my own home, a stranger watching someone else live my life. Then came the night that changed everything. It was around midnight. The baby was crying, and I woke up to the sound of footsteps. I thought it was Ethan. But when I opened the door, it wasn't him. It was Margaret. She was standing in the nursery in her nightgown, holding my baby, rocking him, humming that same eerie lullaby I'd heard during pregnancy. My heart stopped. I whispered, "What are you doing?" She didn't even flinch. She looked down at my son, kissed his forehead, and said softly, "He sleeps better with me." He knows who his real mother is. For a moment, I couldn't speak. It felt like my entire body turned to stone. Then something inside me snapped. "Give him to me," I said. My voice was shaking, but I meant every word. She looked at me like I was the one who'd lost my mind. "You're tired. You need rest. Let me take care of him tonight." I took a step forward. "No. Hand him over." She hesitated, just long enough to make my stomach twist, and then finally placed him in my arms. Her fingers lingered on the baby's blanket, and she whispered again, "He'll call me Mom someday. You'll see." That was it. The moment everything inside me broke, I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just looked her in the eye and said, "Get out of this room." The next morning I told Ethan everything, again. He sighed, rubbed his temples, and said, "You're exhausted. Postpartum is rough. Don't let your mind play tricks on you." That's when I realized I wasn't just fighting her. I was fighting him too. I packed a small bag that afternoon, just in case. My passport, some cash, a few baby clothes. I didn't know when, but I knew I would need to leave. A few days later, she crossed the final line. While I was in the shower, she took my baby for a walk. When I came out, the stroller was gone. My heart nearly stopped. I called Ethan. No answer. I called her. Nothing. For 40 minutes, I ran through the neighborhood barefoot, screaming my son's name. When I finally saw them coming down the street, she looked calm, peaceful even. "Relax," she said. "He needed fresh air." "You're welcome." That night, I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to her footsteps in the hallway, realizing I couldn't live like this another day. By morning, my mind was made up. I didn't know how yet, or where I'd go, but I was leaving. For me, for my baby, for our safety. And deep down, I knew something she didn't. I might look fragile, but I'd already survived worse storms. And this time, I wasn't going to break. The decision to leave wasn't sudden. It was born out of sleepless nights, silent tears, and the kind of fear that creeps into your bones until breathing feels like a risk. After that night, the one where she took my baby, I knew there was no going back. Every time I looked at Margaret, I didn't see a grandmother anymore. I saw danger wrapped in politeness. And every time I looked at Ethan, I saw someone who would never choose me over her. So I stopped waiting for anyone to save me. I started saving myself. It began quietly. Every day, while she hovered around me pretending to help, I made lists in my head. Documents, money, clothes, passports, baby formula. I couldn't rush. I couldn't make her suspicious. I'd smile when she talked, nod when she lectured, and secretly count the hours until she left the room. That's when I'd hide things. A few dollars in a diaper bag, photocopies of my ID in a book cover, a small note with the number of a friend abroad who once said, "If you ever need to disappear, I'll help you." Funny how those words used to sound dramatic. Now they were my lifeline. Ethan thought I was getting better. He didn't notice how detached I'd become, how polite. Maybe that's what guilt looks like when it finally runs dry. A few weeks later, I told him I needed a break. I said I wanted to visit a cousin overseas before the baby got older. He shrugged and said, "Maybe it's a good idea." No resistance, no suspicion, just indifference. It hurt, but it also made things easier. I sold a few pieces of jewelry, secretly, quietly. Every dollar felt like freedom in my palm. Then, one morning, I woke up to a strange calm. The house was quiet. Margaret had gone shopping. Ethan was at work. The baby was asleep in his crib, sunlight falling softly across his face. That was the moment. No dramatic music, no farewell speech, just silence, and the sound of my heartbeat telling me, "Go now." I packed everything I'd hidden: documents, cash, baby clothes. I kissed my son's forehead and whispered, "We're going somewhere safe, okay?" I didn't look back. I couldn't. At the airport, my hands shook as I handed over the passports. Every second felt like an eternity. I kept waiting for someone to stop me, to call my name, to tell me I couldn't go. But no one did. The officer stamped the passports, handed them back and said, "Safe travels. Safe." That word had never sounded real until that moment. When the plane lifted off, I finally exhaled. For the first time in months, I let myself cry, quietly, holding my baby close. The clouds below looked endless, soft and peaceful. Somewhere in that white ocean, I left my old life behind. Landing in a new country felt surreal. The air smelled different, freer. My friend met me at the airport, hugged me tight, and whispered, "You did the right thing." For weeks after, I barely slept. Every knock at the door made my heart race. I kept expecting to see Margaret standing there, smiling like she always did. But she never came. Instead, slowly, peace began to find me again. My son started smiling more. The nightmares faded a little, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a survivor. Sometimes I still wake up at night, half expecting to hear that lullaby, the one she used to hum. But then I look around at the quiet room, the baby monitor glowing softly, and I remind myself, we made it out. And for now, that's enough. The first few weeks in the new country were strange. I remember waking up that first morning and hearing nothing but the faint hum of traffic outside my apartment window. No familiar voices, no passive-aggressive comments. No one knocking on my door uninvited, just silence. For the first time in years, silence felt like safety. My baby was still so small, just a few months old, and every sound she made felt sacred. Her little coos replaced the echoes of my mother-in-law's words. Every giggle, every sleepy sigh reminded me why I had done it, why I'd left everything behind. At first, I was terrified. I had no family, no friends here. I was just a woman with a baby, in a strange country, trying to build a life from scratch. But something inside me shifted. I wasn't scared anymore. I was determined. I rented a small apartment, barely big enough for a crib and a kitchen table, but it was mine. Every corner of that space reflected freedom. I decorated it slowly, one piece at a time, not for perfection, but for peace. There were nights when loneliness hit like a storm. I'd sit by the window, holding my daughter, wondering if I'd made the right choice. Sometimes I even missed the chaos, not because I wanted it back, but because it was all I had ever known. But then she'd smile up at me, tiny and pure, and I knew. This was the beginning of our real life. My husband, though, that was another story. He stayed behind for a while, promising to fix things with his mother, to make her understand. But weeks turned into months, and soon I stopped waiting. Because the truth was, you can't fix someone who doesn't see the problem. I started therapy, something I'd never considered before. My therapist said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the greatest act of love is walking away. It felt strange hearing those words, but they slowly began to make sense. I found work online, freelance writing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something that belonged entirely to me. Each day I got a little stronger. I learned how to laugh again, how to cook just for fun, how to dance around the apartment with my baby to old pop songs. And one day I realized I hadn't thought about my mother-in-law in weeks. Her voice, her smirk, her control, all of it had started to fade. It was like healing in slow motion. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady, quiet growth. I remember standing on the balcony one morning, watching the sunrise. My daughter was asleep, her tiny breath soft against the baby monitor, and I thought to myself, we made it, but peace doesn't mean the story's over, because sometimes when life finally settles, the past has a way of finding you again, no matter how far you've run. And I didn't know it yet, but mine was already on its way back to me. It started with a letter, no return address, no name. Just my name, neatly written across the front in a handwriting I hadn't seen in months. His. My husband's. I froze. My hands trembled as I turned it over, heart pounding like I was about to open Pandora's box. Inside, the letter was short. Too short. He said his mother was sick, really sick, and she wanted to see me and the baby before it was too late. He begged me to come back, said she'd changed, that she just wanted peace before her time was up. For a moment, I felt that old tug, guilt, the kind that hooks deep inside you, reminding you of all the times you were told to forgive and forget. But then I remembered the baby shower. I remembered her whisper. Still, something in me hesitated. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe closure. Maybe, deep down, I just wanted to see for myself if monsters really could change. So, I didn't go back. But I called. When she answered, her voice was weaker than I remembered. Softer, slower, even kind. For the first few seconds, I almost didn't recognize her. "Is that you?" she asked. I said yes. And she started to cry. It was strange, hearing her cry. The woman who once made me feel so small now sounded fragile, human. She apologized. For everything, for what she said, for what she did, for not protecting her son from his own blindness. She said, "I just wanted to feel loved again. When he married you, it felt like I was being replaced, and I didn't know how to handle that. And I'll admit it, for a moment I believed her. I felt my heart ache, not for the woman she was, but for the broken person behind her cruelty. But then, she said something that froze me completely. "I still dream about the baby," she whispered. "Sometimes I see her running to me, calling me Mom." There it was. The same sentence that had haunted me since that day. The child will call me Mom. Except now, it wasn't a whisper in a crowded room. It was a dying confession over the phone, soaked in memory and madness. I didn't know whether to cry or hang up. My heart raced, torn between compassion and fear. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was claiming something that was never hers. Then, before I could respond, my husband's voice came on the line. He didn't sound apologetic. He sounded desperate. "Please just come home," he said. "She doesn't have much time left. You can't let her die thinking you hate her." I felt something snap inside me. I said, "I don't hate her. I just learned to love myself more." And I hung up. That night, I sat by my daughter's crib, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. I realized something, My escape wasn't just about leaving them. It was about choosing me. A week later, I received another message, this time from my husband again. She had passed away. No dramatic ending. No last words. No reconciliation. Just silence. But in that silence, I felt something new. Peace. Not because justice was served or because anyone learned their lesson, but because I finally understood mine. Sometimes closure doesn't come from apologies or revenge. It comes from knowing you survived the storm. And you built something beautiful out of the wreckage. I kissed my daughter's forehead and whispered, "You'll never have to wonder who your mom is." Then I smiled. The kind of smile that comes only when you've walked through fire. And finally realized you were the one holding the match all along. If you've ever had to choose between peace and people who steal it, choose peace. Every single time. Because love doesn't chain you down. It sets you free, you know. People talk about strength like it's something loud. Shouting, fighting, breaking things to prove you're unbreakable. But real strength? It's quiet. It's packing your bags in the middle of the night. It's holding your baby close and whispering, "We're starting over." It's choosing peace, even when chaos is all you've ever known. If my story tells you anything, let it be this. You don't owe anyone your sanity, not even family. Especially not family. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the only way to survive. So if you're watching this right now, and someone's been making you doubt your worth, remember, you're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to rebuild. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize that leaving wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of your freedom. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Because sometimes, one story of survival can give someone else the courage to start theirs.